Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Little Radio Show. My name is Sandra Fernandez, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Juan Alanis and Angelica Casares, and we're bringing you small talk about big topics. We've been on a recording hiatus, so this week we're going to revisit one of our old episodes. Today we go all the way back to episode number 1, original air date, June of 2015, where we talk about what it means to be bilingual and how that impacts us. Just a reminder that you can catch us every week on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Central Time at hmsnetradio.org. Our show archives and the link to our iTunes and Stitcher channels are available at thelittleradioshow.com. The Little Radio Show is brought to you by HispanicHouston.com and JuanofWords.com. Hi, Juan. Hi, Angelica.
Hi.
Hey.
I think we got a great topic lined up, so I'm excited to talk about it.
So, we recently were having a conversation about being bilingual and what that means and how it became. I thought that would be a good thing for today to have with our listeners, all 3 of you out there. So,
which is us.
But I think it's really important. I mean, because, I think we have a tendency not to acknowledge like how important it really is to be bilingual, and how not everybody is bilingual. So I think it's kind of an interesting topic to think about.
Well, the first thing is, of course, my parents are both born in Mexico. So, but my mom didn't grow up speaking Spanish. She came to the States. She was very, very young. I think she was 3 years old. Grew up in a time where you just didn't speak Spanish. She went to school, didn't. My dad, on the other hand, grew up in Mexico. So Spanish was his primary language. They had kids, and they wanted to make sure their kids spoke Spanish, so they made every effort that we were bilingual. English dominant, but bilingual. According to my dad, the worst thing that you could do is hablar mucho. Speak in Spanglish. That would get me.
Is that a bad thing?
That's what he said. Well, he didn't want us to end up in classes where we weren't being given the same education as everyone else. And it was his opinion. So he wanted us to be strong in English, but
That's
still
great.
have Spanish skills.
Yeah.
Now, that might have been true then, but now it's obviously very much pushed to be bilingual.
Yeah, and I think, for my parents are both from Mexico, and Spanish is still their first language. So I think to a large degree they always said, we don't speak English at all, until they really had to, and they were in a position where they had to speak English. Then it would come out, and todo mucho, but it would come out. And I think for me, I did learn Spanish with them, but it wasn't. It wasn't like the formal Spanish. So when I went to college and I took Spanish, and I thought, I'm going to take this test and I'm going to pass, and I'm going to, go on to, earn my credits. And they said, no, you need remedium of Spanish. And so I was shocked. But it really helped to take those college courses and to really learn the grammatical correct version of Spanish. So that's helped me a lot.
What's grammatically correct if it's not the conversations you can have with your parents? I mean, they're obviously not going to speak the same way you do. So how important was it for you to take those classes? Did it help you to communicate better with your family, or was it just for education-wise?
Well, I think because of in my particular case, we spoke very regionally. So in Mexico, the way we spoke was very regional to the area that we were from. So, it wasn't necessarily the Spanish that professionally I ended up needing when I went to work as a journalist in Spanish, because then we were looking at the Real Academia Española, and so that was completely different. So it was good to learn the accents, to learn the proper usage of terminology. And, for a little bit I was kind of correcting myself, and when I was talking to my parents I was correcting, we would say parqueadero and I would be like estacionamiento. And then after a while I was like, wait a minute, who am I to be correcting my parents? So I just said, it's parqueadero.
Well, for conversational purposes, and absolutely, if you can hold a conversation in Spanish, you are bilingual. But I don't know if that means fully bilingual or just conversational bilingual. In my career, being able to know where the accents go and what the correct verb tenses are, and you being able to select the correct word to be proper Spanish has helped me a lot. Yeah. But I don't know that would make a difference in any of the conversations I have with my family. My family gets together, and for the most part, we are all English speakers. You're going to hear mostly English, but we will float in and out of Spanish very casually, especially if we assume everyone in the room understands. Now, if someone's with us where we know that they're not bilingual, or that or if we remember that their Spanish skills are not as good as ours, then we will make a very concerted effort to speak more in English than in Spanish. My nieces and nephews are not strong Spanish speakers. My youngest nephew tells me that Spanish is very hard. He's in a Mandarin Chinese program, and according to him, Chinese is easy and Spanish is hard, which basically means that for him, Spanish is work and Chinese is fun.
Yeah.
So for me, obviously, I didn't take Spanish classes by any means, because it was very conversational for me. I didn't have to speak it professionally, and I didn't have to write it professionally. But I find that I connect with people more when I speak it in the terms that I know it, like Juan said, regionally. And that's everywhere. Of course, we come across like Juan's brother-in-law who's from Uruguay, and his Spanish is completely off to me. So we float in and out of conversation. Sometimes we have to backtrack and be like, I have no idea what you just said. Can you please repeat that? But I find that even if I don't know it, it is important. Now, I don't think I don't have to correctly know it to be able to communicate. So it wasn't maybe it's because I'm not a journalist like you two guys are, but I find that I connect with people easier sometimes, even when I am with Juan, who knows it better than I do, I can relate. It seems they come to me better with a related understanding. And I think that's where, I can prevail a little bit over you guys.
Well, you're listening to the little radio show, and we're talking about bilingualism. And I think, Angelica, you tend to think sometimes that you're not as bilingual as you are, because sometimes she's a little more cautious about her Spanish. But when she really needs to speak Spanish, it comes out.
It comes out.
Yeah.
If it has to, listen. If it has to, and I'm on the street and I need to communicate quick and fast. Yeah, you're right. It is. All of a sudden, I know words and I have no idea what the hell but I communicated.
But one of the things that really though impacts what we're talking about is we live in Houston, Texas.
Correct.
Yeah.
Seriously, and Houston is one of the most Spanish prevalent cities in the country.
If I can formally say this, I think we are the Spanglish Mecca. I kid you not. I think we are.
Well, I used to have a coworker that used to say, we're in Texas, speak Spanish. So I think that pretty much sums it up.
But no, what that means though is that in Houston, commercially, professionally, there's a stronger need for Spanish skills. To interact with customers, to reach different types of market, for advertising, for public relations, for communications purposes. For those of us who work in those fields, Spanish is an incredible asset to have. Being able to have more formal Spanish is a requirement, really. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you the amount of time I get people reach out to me and they're like, do you know someone who is fully bilingual? And by that they mean who can read it and write it and understand it and speak it, who can do X, Y, and Z. And that includes accountants and nurses and, all sorts of different professions. They are importing teachers in from other countries. Seriously.
And I think we know that, as people that work with big corporations and who where increasingly the U.S. Hispanic audience is important, and it's more and more important when we're recruiting people to work with us. It's hard. It really is really hard to find somebody who's truly bilingual, because a lot of people will say I do speak Spanish, or I'm comfortable in Spanish, or I can manage myself in Spanish, but that's not the same as being bilingual. Bilingual really means that you can write it, you understand where the punctuation is, and that you can read it and speak it correctly.
Well, my test used to be, because of my previous job, can you tell me the correct word for library? And most people will tell you libreria, which is a bookstore. The correct word for library is biblioteca. And so that right there was...
You see, when you said biblioteca, I wanted to say librioteca. And of course, that's not the correct...
That's not a real word.
That's not even a word. But that's my... Again, I don't speak it professionally, but what you were saying, Juan, is this. That I don't think it's only a professional thing. I think to get around, you have to know the language, at least to hear it, to get around quickly and fast, to be able to communicate with everyone in your community. Again, we live in Houston, Texas, so it's not a requirement, but as long as you understand it and you can nod or disagree and people understand you better. So I don't think it's just a professional thing. And I don't agree with you when you say truly bilingual. You have to...
And I don't think that, and I think I don't think every industry is like that. I think that, just the area that I've been working in, it's sad to me, sometimes when I'm looking at resumes or when I'm having the conversation and I ask, and then I figure out, oh, they're not completely bilingual, I can't hire them. And to me, that's like, wow, it's crazy that there's not more people that are fully bilingual.
And but the trend is that more Hispanics are speaking English than ever before. Let's be real about that. In millennials and in younger generations, what we're finding is that Spanish is not the dominant language, and as Juan and I are calling truly bilingual, well, that being bilingual is more a relationship thing, is more an emotional thing. Than it is a functional. I don't need to get my information in Spanish, but I am comfortable in it.
Well, here's why I disagree, because in reality, how many can you say actually are truly monolingual with the English language? I mean, how many can you truly say can speak it well and who can write it well?
I'm not touching that one.
I mean, let's get, for me, honestly, just I will speak on my own. But how can you really say, if you're truly bilingual, if you can speak and write Spanish, when honestly, like, if I have to say even me, who has a very hard time with writing it, so, I mean, how can you honestly say truly, this bilingual thing, you have to read and write Spanish? And I mean, now you're asking for like Superwoman and Superman. I mean, now we're asking for but it's true. There are very few out there who can do it well.
Well, I think that it depends on the industry that you're in. And if it's an industry where you're required to write and you're required to read and you're required to speak it in a professional manner, then it is required.
But I'm going to go further than that. If you're in the medical field, the type of language that you need to know in Spanish is different than those of us who work in advertising and PR, than those people who maybe work in the legal field. There's technical terms. So it's highly unlikely you're going to get people coming in who have that kind of expert level of language. You have to learn, if you're an English speaker, you have to learn the technical terms for it. Having to learn it in another language, there's got to be a training for it somewhere out there.
However, that's not to say that being bicultural or understanding the culture is not going to be a huge help to you as well. I mean, there are fields out there that just understanding the culture, understanding the nuances that are within the Hispanic community, for example, if we're talking about that community, that is going to help you. But in specific industries, being bilingual 100% is a big plus, and it will help you along the way. At least now, it is a big help to help you in your career.
Well, this is a little radio show, and we're talking about being bilingual. So my question is, should we be making sure that the next generation speaks Spanish? Is that something that is important and that we need to do? Because there's two sides of the argument. There is the side of the argument, and I have family members who believe this, is we're in the U.S., no one needs anything more than English. Then there's the side of the argument, there's actually several sides of the argument. There's a side of the argument where every other major country in the world, the large ones, make sure that their children are multilingual. Not just that they learn one language or two languages, but several, to make them well-rounded and make them citizens of the world. In the U.S., especially for us, I don't want my nieces and nephews to lose the connection that we have with our culture. And language is a big part of that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think for us as parents, we can say that, we do consider being bilingual important. At least I do. But I think we were a lot more proactive about it when Edgar was younger, because we, kind of insisted, no, say it in Spanish, say it in Spanish, say it in Spanish. And then we reached a point where, he hit a certain age and he was turned to us and was like, well, we all speak English. Why do I need to say it in Spanish? and so I think that kind of was a wake-up call for us too. Like, hey, if that is true, and, he still has to speak to my parents and her parents in Spanish and, other family members in Spanish. And he does have a working knowledge of it. Is he 100%? Can he read, write, and speak it? That's debatable, I would say. But, I do think it's important to have that those bilingual skills.
And I have to agree. I think for conversational purposes, again, I go always back to, can you communicate? Can you communicate? And not only can you communicate by writing, but can you verbally communicate with people? Yes, you need to be able to be bilingual. Edgar has to be able to understand my mom, which means he understands Spanish. She asks something in Spanish, she talks in Spanish, he responds in English. And this is where we are. I mean, and for now, I'm okay with that. I think later, when I think he better absorb this, I think I don't know. I'm not making it an absolute thing now. As long as he can understand it, as long as when they have conversations, of course, when he talks, he tries to tell her something. She has to and they that's when it becomes a problem, when she tries to talk English and when he tries to talk Spanish. So as long as they stay to their language and they understand each other, we're good. So yes, I do believe
as long as they understand each other, they're good.
Yeah, as long as they understand each other. Isn't that the way our relationships work though? But yeah, I do agree. The kids have to be bilingual, or they have to learn other.
Well, I think one of the interesting things that I read recently was that, before, especially for the millennial generation, that they're looking at language as part of their culture. And, in the millennial segment, a lot of these kids, they're selecting what their culture is. They're defining their own culture. So language does play a role in that, but who's to say 5-10 years from now what role language is going to actually play in that?
And the marketing fancy term that Juan is talking about is retroacculturation. And
there's a word for it?
There is a word. It's retroacculturation. And that basically means is when you go back and you're actually going back and re-embracing parts of your culture that may have gotten diluted or may have gotten lost in previous generations or in your own generation. So let's say that you're the second or third generation Hispanic, and that honestly, Spanish is no longer a dominant part of what you do, but you go back and you learn Spanish and you re-embrace it. That's actually part of a current trend. It's called retroacculturation. It's a big thing in marketing.
So you learn something every day with Sandra.
Yeah, you do. You see, now I got to go back and look at that. I got to go define it myself.
Now, if I have any listeners out there that know a more scientific term for what retroacculturation is, please feel free to come out to the website and share it via a comment. However, that's my, marketing 101 intro boot camp kind of description of what that means. No, but the truth of it is that, do I think that my nieces and nephews must speak Spanish? No, they can get along fine without speaking Spanish. If their English is good, which of course it is, it has to be because they're doing very well in school, that is all they technically need. Mm-hmm. Do their opportunities increase in their fields? By knowing Spanish, yes, that's absolutely true. Especially my niece is a pre-med, and so she is making sure that she learns Spanish because she knows she's going to need it. She's going to be, she wants to be a pediatrician. Pediatrician in Texas, doesn't speak Spanish. Hello. However, I do think that there's a layer of richness that is lost from their lives if they don't have It's not just the language, but it's the understanding of all of the jokes and all of the things that we talk about and everything that comes connected to the language. I think that they're missing out.
Yes, the feelings of the words that we say things, or there are certain things that you do that it doesn't translate. It can't translate.
Yeah, and I think you're listening to the little radio show. We're talking about bilingualism and the importance of it, but I think there are also like you said, like characters. Like if you don't know who Veronica Castro is, if you don't know who Talia is, if you don't know, those are little things that you kind of pick up. El Chavo del Ocho, you pick them up.
Which my nieces and nephews don't know any of those. Yeah. Thank you.
And
really? Oh no, that has to change. That has to change. I think we're gonna buy a few videos and hand them over.
We're sending DVDs your way, Sandra.
Oh no, I was so thrilled when I heard that El Chapulín Colorado got added to Netflix. The first season of El Chapulín Colorado from 1973 is on Netflix. You should see how young they look. Oh my god, it is a great and fabulous thing.
Edgar does like El Chavo. He likes La India Maria. He knows these characters. He knows Don Francisco, who sadly is going away this year. But, he knows all those characters.
Yeah, my nephew's closest thing is Dora the Explorer.
Oh no, that's just sad.
That's just sad.
Which is why he thinks Spanish is hard. And Mandarin Chinese is easy.
Well, you see, the way Edgar was introduced was, I think they did a good thing when they did the whole, cartoon version of Chavo del Ocho. And Edgar was like, what is this? And they were interested, and all of a sudden they were looking for more. And, of course, they came on to the whole, where it originated. And they seeked it out. So if you introduce it to them, I think they will. I mean, and that is a very great way to sit there and introduce the culture with culture, be able to reference cultural things, and that they can come back and be like, what are you talking about? What is this? And introduce it like that. I think if you can snag them there, they'll come on board. But
I think for me, I observe myself now, and I grew up watching Spanish TV, watching novelas, watching, that's all we watched was Univision. So I think now, when I look at what I watch...
The TV had one setting, Channel 45, Univision.
And when I look at what I watch now, I don't watch Spanish TV at all anymore. And it's a little shocking because I'm like, wow, I grew up on this stuff, and now all I watch is Netflix and Hulu, and I don't watch anything else. Not even English, general market. I just watch...
That just means that your media consumption has changed. I mean, honestly, there are very few TV shows I watch on TV. On TV in real time. I tried to explain this to my nephew once about how watching a show meant you had an appointment.
Yeah. Yes.
And he looked at me like I was insane. Because, what do you mean? You had to be in front of the TV couldn't you just DVR it or watch it on Hulu later, or just get it on demand? No, sweetie. None of that existed. Why?
Why couldn't you play back? Yeah. So it was a big deal when you were able to pre-record your shows and come back and watch it. So it was a big thing.
VCRs were a great and wonderful thing, let me tell you.
So is that the same direction that bilingual is, the whole bilingual thing is going? It's it's important, but it's not important, but it's important, and I can learn it later.
Well, my nephew does an hour of Rosetta Stone every day in Spanish while he's on vacation. And to him, it's work. And he has to do his hour of Rosetta Stone before he gets to do his hour of YouTube channels. Because he doesn't watch TV. He watches YouTube. Thank you very much.
Wow, and how's his Spanish doing?
I can't get him to talk to me.
He refuses. You need to learn Mandarin, Sandra. That's what
he won't talk to me in Mandarin either.
But see, I think learning Mandarin is so cool because that's another language that's going to be really important in the global economy. Yeah. So I think, having that language, the Mandarin, is going to be really helpful. On top, if he becomes bilingual in Spanish too, he's going to be trilingual. That's going to be...
Well, he keeps saying he's going to be trilingual, but he doesn't want to right now. Yeah. No, my sister, when she put him in the program, in the Mandarin Chinese program that HISD has, she had intended to put him in a dual language Spanish program. That was the intent. That he could be immersed and he could be fully bilingual completely through. The way they do these programs is not ESL, it's not GED, it's not even bilingual. It's not even bilingual ed really. It's a full immersion program where they teach them math and science, and you're not allowed to speak English during the half a day that's being taught in another language.
Yeah, you see, that sounds like torture to me. I don't think I'd be able to do that.
But that's the best way to learn.
It's the best way to learn. They have all these kids together in a room, and the teacher only speaks to them in the language that they're learning and teaches them, this other stuff, the math, which is universal, except for the terms that they're using. They spend half a day, and they are forced to learn. And by immersion program, this is how they learn. So my sister was going to put him in a dual language Spanish. The Mandarin came up and we talked about it. And so I'm like, well, sweetie, we can teach him Spanish. Honest to goodness, we can't teach him Chinese. Mm-hmm. And so that's why he considers, he's been to school 3 years now. He spends half his school day every day in a Chinese environment. To him, Chinese is easy because he talks to his friends in Chinese. He talks to the teacher in Chinese. He has Chinese homework every day. To him, this is something that Chinese is easy and Spanish is hard because his friends are not sitting there talking to him in Spanish.
So he's not interested as much.
That's what it is.
That's where it comes down to.
That's where it comes down to.
But I think that, I think what you're saying, immersion is the best way to learn. It really is correct because when I worked in Spanish for a couple of months and I talked Spanish, I wrote in Spanish, everything we did was in Spanish. All my meetings were in Spanish, and I think that was about an 8-month period of my life. And I think that really honed my skills in Spanish because it forced me to think in Spanish and to do it every single day, 7 days a week. And it was through that I really began to really understand where the punctuation went and what the proper usage was. And it's been a big, big benefit for me.
But again, that's because you actually work with the language on a regular basis. I have a lot of my family members are educators, and some of them are bilingual educators, and some of them are not, even though they are bilingual. They've got different specialties. And the thing that they always say is you actually have to speak it. Like, just getting kids in a classroom or getting them in front of a school book and saying, say this, say this, say this. No, it's practice.
And reading it in Spanish. Reading Spanish.
Well, reading is the key to everything. In English, Spanish, and every language, quite honestly.
Yeah, but I think... And then you also hear about a lot of people who just go to a different country and they just immerse themselves in the language and they're there for a period of time, like 6 months or a year, and then they come back and they're fluent. They're completely fluent.
So... All right, so this is us at the Little Radio Show wrapping up a conversation about being bilingual. And obviously we all have different opinions and diverse opinions on this. But at the very least, I'm going to put out some resources if anybody wants to actually, as an adult, learn. Is most libraries offer a free subscription to a service called Mango Languages, which is very much like Rosetta Stone, or something similar to it, where you go online and you do different types of audio and visual lessons to help you learn a different language. Spanish is, of course, one of the languages that's allowed. The subscription is free with through most libraries. People can check their libraries to do that.
That's great that it's free.
A lot of cities have language meetups where people get together and speak in a different language, either Chinese or Spanish or other stuff. For those people who have beginner to moderate skills and want to get some practice on that, they can look them up. Probably meetup.com would be a good place to start.
And I think some cities have Toastmasters in Spanish.
They do.
Which is a big help too.
But I think the meetup.com, and I tried to go to some of the Spanish sessions and it doesn't work out. But I think I need to. I really do think I need to. So I think I'm going to look up at that. So please do involve that. Please do include that.
So look for Angelica at a class near you.
Yeah. And I know that in Houston, the library hosts several groups that do conversation meetings, including Spanish. I think they also do one in Chinese and some other languages. You can check with your local library to find out if your library does anything, or you can start one of your own, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And just practice.
Yes, and so do we want to do anything else? For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, my name is Sandra Fernandez, and you can also catch me on sandrasays.com. I'm the publisher of Hispanic Houston, which you can catch on hispanichouston.com.
And I'm Juan Alanis, and you can find me everywhere on social and online at Juan of Words. That's Juan, like the name of words, and it's also a website, juanofwords.com, and that's a founder of that website with Angelica, and that's where we do our online content creation, and outside of that I also work in the field of communications, but find me online at juanofwords.com.
Really quickly, so this is Angelica Casares, and you can find me at La Angel, LA_ANGEL, and join me for the Selfie Project.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Little Radio Show. We invite you to check out our iTunes and our Stitcher channels and leave us a rating or a review. You can find the link to both channels at thelittleradioshow.com.